Howdy, howdy, howdy. Look who decided to join us. And there he goes. He's out.
Actually, I was just quickly popping in the background just to help you with the setup. So I will say hello and goodbye.
Hello and goodbye. So welcome to this week Talks with Jay. Normally Chris will be here with me, but he's got family, so he won't be with us this week. But today, in the Buddhist Talks, I'm actually joined with Sam Chaos, who is a pagan / Hellenist.
Yeah, Hellenist is generally the term I use.
Okay.
Which is, Hellenist is going to mean Greek or Roman, usually, pagan.
Okay. So why don't you, for those that don't know, why don't you let us know what they mean by pagan?
So this brings into a fun definitions conversation where if you ask 10 pagans to define paganism, you'll get 12 different definitions. So the general gist is religious traditions that have previously died and are now being, I guess, reconstructed, or just non-major traditions. I know some Buddhists who consider themselves pagan and are happy to use the term pagan for them, but not all do, obviously. And the same with Hindus. They tend to, people tend not to include like indigenous people, and then some Wiccans not. It's more of a, if someone introduces himself to me as pagan, I'll call them pagan.
Okay. See, when I think pagan, I think like Norse or even Wiccan. So that's where I kind of, because I'm not very.
So the most pagans are Norse, and Wiccan is the biggest, what's considered pagan religion.
Mm-hmm.
But the heathen community, which is the kind of Germanic paganism community, is significantly bigger than the Hellenism one. And so that's how do I words? Basically, that's the impression a lot of people get from us, is that it's mainly Norse and Wiccan, because those are the people most represented. But there's a bunch of like tiny minority groups, and then it depends. Do you define witches as pagan? Some people do, some people don't.
Yeah, I would. But Raven said the reason I think that is because my wife's an evil Norse pagan.
Yes.
So now you say Hellenist, which is Greek.
Yeah.
So it's like Theseus, Odysseus, Perseus, a lot of us's.
Yes.
That
is Attic Greek naming conventions and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little throwback to the Hercules movie.
See, for me it'd be Heracles, because I'm not a Roman Hellenist.
Yeah, see, I prefer Heracles over Hercules, but I had to go with the Disney pronunciation of it.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah.
It's possibly also worth clarifying that a lot of pagans introduce elements from other pagan traditions into their own.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I have a bit of Norse, a bit of Celtic, a bit of a couple of different places, as well as Hellenist, but it's primarily Hellenist.
Now, see, with me, in Buddhism, there's three main sects. There's Theravada, and the other two are really hard to pronounce, so I had to look them up. Vajrayana and Mahayana are the three main, plus you also have Zen. So for me, I'm a mixture of Zen Buddhism and Theravada Buddhism. Now, Theravada Buddhism is mainly in India, Burma, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia. That's actually, Theravada actually follows more along the life of Buddha and Buddhist teachings in the Pali Canon, which I actually happen to have. I pulled it out for this one. I actually have a book in Buddha's words. It's an anthology of discourses from the Pali Canon. So these are actual Buddha's words in the Pali Canon.
That's pretty cool.
Now,
I think I probably have a copy of that somewhere because my stepmom liked to collect like spiritual books, effectively.
Mm-hmm.
What were you going to say? Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, now I know a lot of different religions have their books. I've never known. I know there's tales of the Greek mythos and whatnot. Is there like a book? Like there's the Bible, there's the Polycanon, there's the Buddhist Bible, there's the Quran. Is there anything like that for the Greeks?
So no, not really. Though we have a lot of literature, is the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think would it potentially be useful to explain how the Greeks saw their myths to the best of our understanding? That does color things a lot.
Yeah.
So the way the Greeks saw their myths were that heroes in myths probably existed.
Mm-hmm.
They probably didn't do the things in the myths, but they probably did something that it was symbolized by. A lot of the monsters and stuff were symbolic of either social issues or wars that happened or things like that. And then the gods were described doing things to culturally explain their connotations.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason you get Zeus whoring around is because in ancient Greece, if you could whore around, you had a higher social status.
Mm-hmm.
So the god who fucks around the most is the most powerful, or hierarchically speaking. And that's where that comes from, which kind of, it results in, because we look at things through a modern lens, a lot of people will just go, oh, the Greek gods were dicks. The stories that people told to explain the Greek gods to each other, they were dicks.
Yeah. Now, going back to that, I do understand that the Minotaur was a symbol of the power of greed, and Heracles was supposed to be the perfect man. We're showing his. Yeah, that's from what I understand.
He was very much created to be the paragon, which I'm not even sure if paragon's the correct term. I forget what. I forget who used which terms for what, but basically, the idea was for him to be the virtuous man.
Mm-hmm.
And being virtuous would make you more closely connected to the gods. Hence the whole being born of,
being Amphitryon and Zeus,
and so that kind of, it's very much allegorical, and for people who think that the myths were supposed to be taken literally, because I know a few pagans like that, I'd like to point them to the first line of Hesiod, where it says this was inspired by the Muses and the Muses lie.
Yeah. Now, the Hesiod, I was just looking something up this morning. Wasn't the Hesiod written in like 900 BC?
Might have been.
Was that Homer's? Because I think
Homer wrote Hesiod.
Was it Homer that wrote Hesiod? What was the other one? It was Hesiod, and there was another one. I wish I'd have kept that up. Thinking of what?
Were you thinking of the Odyssey?
That might have been what I was thinking of. The Iliad and the Odyssey.
Yeah. So Hesiod was. I've just done a quick Google now, and it looks like Hesiod was around 700-ish BC.
Okay.
So we're too far off in historical terms.
Yeah. Before we get too far into this, why? I guess what brought you to believing in the Greek mythos? Because by this point, we pretty much know that what happened didn't happen for the most part. But why would you? I'm not even why would you, but why this belief over, say, any other, like, say Christianity, Buddhism, Jainism, Islam? Why go for the Greek or even the Norse?
Oh, now see, here's the thing: is that I don't go for the Greek over the Norse. I also happen to worship Thor, for example.
Okay, so you incorporate both.
Yeah, I incorporate elements of different ones. I also do a bit of Celtic in terms of the Morrigan, for example. Okay. And my view is really very omnistic. A lot of religions probably come from somewhere, and so I'm willing to at least grant that their god exists in some capacity if they have a god.
Okay.
So I think I will hold that Yahweh exists, just he's a dick and a liar.
Yeah,
Um,
I can see that.
and at least in the Christian conception,
Mhm.
I would generally go with trickster God because there are several traditions around Yahweh. You know,
Yeah.
there's so there's my general view on it is of a lot of the gods existing and there being different valid ways to interact with them. And I was just kind of pulled towards Greek, but the reason I came to that belief was that while I was still a Christian, I had a spiritual experience with the Morrigan, which let me tell you was a trip.
Refresh our memories
Sure.
on the
So
Morrigan.
the kind of I don't like the archetype system, but the archetype that the Morrigan fills is a triple goddess of death and war, but also with aspects of like fertility and harvest.
Okay.
My personal view on it, though this is me reading into things a bit, is a bit of a destruction to cause creation,
Okay.
or to allow for development.
So we do have a question from Ed. Do you use or study runes in any religious ways?
Not in religious ways, but in witchy ways. I is it? I think I might have my set of yeah. Here is my bag of runestones that I use to do runestone readings.
Okay.
These fuckers.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I use them for divination in my witchcraft, and also occasionally if I'm doing some sort of, especially spells, but also if I'm doing some sort of ritual generally that involves some symbolism that I think a rune really well represents, I will have the rune out to help me focus on that symbolism. So there's kind of three bits to it where it can be used in a religious context, and it can be used in a witchy context, but it can also be used from a psychological context to give myself a focus.
Okay. So sticking with that, hang on, just who's it? I know the Greeks had like the Oracle at Delphi,
Yeah.
and whatnot. Do those type of things? Do you how to like you do with the runes? Do you take any of that type of divination type things? Because I from what I understand, it is believed that the oracles of Delphi would like um like hallucinate and stuff like that. Do you do anything like that?
I don't personally. I know people who do, and when I say they do, for people in the chat, I don't mean do that through having drugs or whatever. I mean during a ritual that will happen to them.
Okay.
Without the consumption of drugs or alcohol or anything. And that's great, and that's kind of their personal experience. I tend to be of the view that someone's personal religious experiences are applicable to them, and then if you want to pay attention to them for some additional insight, that's great, but yours should be primary.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of my religious views are very personal experience oriented, and so I would hold that it's like a valid form of divination. It's just not one I use. So I use runestones, pendulum, tarot, oracle cards. Stuff.
So you stick with the Wiccan type divinations, compare as opposed to say
the Wiccans are picked up, yeah, just because they're easiest to get my hands on, and I'm 19 and
broke. 19 and broke. Well, yeah, I remember those days.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to be a pragmatist witch.
that was almost 30 years for me. Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is because we are in this community.
Yeah.
And we are for the lack of better term, theists.
Yeah.
Do you get a lot of what's that?
I think for both of us, it's probably theist asterisk. It depends how you define theist.
Yeah. So do you get a lot of blowback from the other side? from like say the Christian side or whatnot. Like I know for me personally as a Buddhist, I don't get a lot of blowback, and I don't get a lot of people trying to come at me like they do with like atheists. Do you get that same thing, or do they come at you more considering that you're a pagan?
They arguably come at me more. It depends on the area. So, where I am, if I mention being pagan in the town I live in, everyone will come at me more. If I go a few towns over, and I mention being pagan, everyone's like, "Oh, okay, chill." And if I go a few towns over in the other direction, the response will basically be, "What's a pagan?" Which is better.
Yeah. I was getting to it, Chris, in the background. Chris wants to know, do you believe in the actual gods themselves, or do you see them more as a symbol?
So this is so I have some beliefs that are unusual within paganism, and this is where it gets interesting. Is that I don't think we can tell the difference. But I like I also have the view that you can consciously, to some extent, change your beliefs, which is not a particularly popular one. And so when the standard question comes back, oh, so can you choose to be an atheist now if you wanted? Yeah, I could. I have done before. And so with that, it's kind of I'm very pragmatist, and so the way I look at it is that I go with the gods actually exist, and I'm kind of fairly agnostic on the concept of an afterlife, but I'm going to hold that the gods exist because that's what my personal experiences would lead me to believe. And I think I'm quite philosophically minded, and philosophically it's perfectly balanced. It could go either way, so personal experience is all I have to go off.
See, for me, especially with the Norse gods, like I believe there may have been people with exceptional strength and stuff that actually existed that people elevated to god status. In that kind of aspect, I mean, obviously there's mythical things around them and whatnot, but
the sort of literary explanations as opposed to religious explanations.
Yeah, and then
that makes sense.
With the Greeks, not so much. I mean, the demigods, Heracles and Perseus and Theseus, those people, like you said before, probably existed. The gods themselves, I don't think so much. But I'm the same way with Yahweh. I don't believe Yahweh exists, but I do think that there might have been maybe an amalgamation of somebody that they cobbled together for Jesus. So
so I find the Jesus story being a historical amalgam the most probable, but I don't. This is one of those where I don't really care enough to read into it too much. It just from the information I have, it seems most probable.
Yeah. So, if anybody's got any questions for myself or for Sam, tag me in the chat or tag Hereticals, and we'll try to get them out there.
Now, are you a theistic or an atheistic Buddhist?
Okay, that's a little kind of because there are aspects of that. When I first started, I was strictly atheistic Buddhist. But over the last 2 years or so, basically since I've been on YouTube and I've my studies have picked up more, I'm leaning more towards not so much a theistic, but the supernatural things like reincarnation, things like that. I am not so much. I haven't really got any. I don't know how to explain it. Really, I don't feel like there are gods and devils like you'll read in some of the Buddhist texts.
I was about to ask, what are your thoughts on kind of divas and yakshas?
See, as of right now, I don't feel that they are actual creatures. More, I guess more feeling. So you would get them more of a type of God, I'm drawing a blank today. Emotional type things. So like, you know, the any divas that deal with fire and death and, you know, this stuff like that would be more towards your anger emotion. So, you know,
Okay,
things
so
that way.
personifies or anthropomorphized emotional states and stuff. I can see that.
Yeah, they're more, like you said, they're more of a type of feeling than an actual physical thing. Is the way I'm seeing it now. Like I said, I'm still reading. The one thing I learned, especially because I went on a 10-day vow of silence, and one of the things I pulled from that was that I know nothing, and I understand that, and I realize that I know nothing. And when you can understand,
Acknowledging that you know nothing is the first step to still knowing nothing.
exactly. So I've constantly, you know, I've read. Like I'm just starting this one. I'm not that far into it, but I do have what's called the Buddhist Bible. I don't think I have it here with me. No, I don't. No, I've read through that one a couple times, but every time I read through it, I find something new. So, you know, it's one of those. You're always
the more you read
learning
through something, the more you can look at it and interpret it and try and understand meanings behind it, especially because it was written from a different cultural perspective.
Oh, that was for well, Micro Raptor did put a comment that I don't remember where I read it, but I heard Odin might have been inspired by a real person where the stories overturned him into a god.
So where that comes from is I think it might have been the Sanctum Deorum. I'm trying to remember now. Fuck, I should know this. Basically, a lot of the stories that were written down by Christians described the gods as humans that the common folk perceived as gods.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is where that idea comes from. Now, might the Christians have got the right answer from the wrong place? Possibly. But where that idea commonly comes from is like an incorrect. I would say it doesn't logically follow, should we say. It's one of those, if it is, we have no good reason to know it.
Oh, okay. I guess we can kind of answer this too. Microraptor asked this: do you see atheists in this community and thought only a god could have created this much craziness?
Oh no, you get worse.
Yeah. I've seen lots. Because I'm not only at one point I was actually part of the atheist community. I was part of the skeptic community, the debunk community. So I've seen that from I would say 3 different angles, because, you know, well, what's the difference between a skeptic community and a debunk community? Well, I would put Paulogia as a skeptic and Dead Kennedy in Space as a debunker, if that would give you any type of examinations. So that's kind of.
See, it's funny because I tend to view a lot of the. I tend to view the atheist community as kind of like interconnected with what I'd call the deconstruction community as well, which is people who have kind of effectively taken apart their core beliefs and then put them back together and seen what comes out of that. Which is how it's the story of how a lot of skeptics get to their skepticism. But I mean, also I should add that skepticism came from pagans, and I am a skeptic. But that gets me into arguments. Yeah, a lot of atheists don't like to think that a polytheist could also be skeptical. But the atheist community has a lot of people who have deconstructed their belief, but not everyone who has deconstructed their belief has to be an atheist. It doesn't mean you've done it correctly. And I would say I've deconstructed, or I'm in the process of deconstructing, because it's a continuous thing. But I think that a lot of the craziness in the atheist community is just people being people, and other people not trying to hide it. And my opinion would also be people not trying to police it very well, which is one of the things I do like about the pagan spaces I've found, small as they are, is that they're fairly good at checking people if they say something like particularly racist or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think a lot of atheists don't see the atheist community as a community, and so the broader atheist community don't necessarily see it that way.
This one, I kind of just went over this one, normalizing atheism. Do I have a belief in a deity or deities? I'm at a point where I can't say yes and I can't say no. So I guess you would be more agnostic to the point if you want to simplify it, because I do think there are some supernatural things going on in the world, like I said before, reincarnation. Some of the things that you see different people do, just makes you just go wow. So there's some things. Do I believe in a deity? Not so much. Like I mentioned before, because I know you came in a little later. I do tend to think of, especially the Norse pantheon, more of persons exaggerated. Same with the Greek demigods, if that helps any bit. But like I said before, I'm still learning. My views have changed since I started. They may change again. They may stay the same way they are for now. But it depends. As of right now, I said I know nothing.
Yeah.
So I'm
if your
constantly
beliefs, I think if your beliefs aren't fluid and aren't able to be changed, even if it's just in like little smaller ways,
learning.
you're probably doing something wrong if you're not willing to have them change.
So I have a favorite particular story. I actually have two. But do you have a particular favorite story from the Greek mythology?
So, I have two that are my favorites. One is effectively the story of how Hermes got away with stealing cows by making a musical instrument, which is the most oversimplified way of explaining it. And the other was, there's a couple of variations on it, but the myth around Hephaestus' birth.
Oh, Hephaestus?
Yes.
Yeah. So I want to clarify something here, because Sam will probably mention the names and probably the way they're supposed to be pronounced. So
I don't think so.
So I may come back with a more modern pronunciation. I think so if that happens.
Yeah, I do sometimes go with Attic Greek pronunciation. Sometimes.
Yeah. So, like, for me, two of my favorites, one of them is, oddly, it's cliche, is the 12 labors of Heracles. The whole story behind him, for me, from birth to death, is just fabulous story. And the other one is the story of Arachnia.
That's fun.
That's a good story. That's where you get your spiders from. So, and that's where people get arachnophobia from.
Yep.
So,
and some people just get arachnophobia from hearing the myth.
Yeah. Actually, Uranus comes from the other side. Never mind. My rapper said Uranus comes to mind.
Oh, I don't know. Some people have theirs here.
Yeah, that's true. Some of them. It reminds me of the South Park episode of Cartman.
Oh dear. Yeah, I think the thing with the Greeks is that there's so many myths and then there's variations on them that picking a favorite is hard. But you do what you do. I also really like the ones around Medusa.
Oh, the Medusa, that's a good story too. Now, I wanted to ask, because we know the Romans basically took over the Greek mythology. Other than the names, how much of it was actually changed? Do you know?
Actually, depends how nuanced you want to get. From like an outside perspective, not much. From an inside perspective, like significant things were changed. So a lot of the connotations were changed because the Romans didn't steal the Greek gods. The Romans took each Greek god, smashed them together with one of their existing gods, and said, "This is mine now, my homework." I totally didn't cheat. And so because they did this mostly, they did adopt certain yeah, Chris is right. They didn't actually take it over. There are a lot of big differences. They adopted some of the stories and altered them, and they adopted a lot of the traits from the Greek gods and things like that. But a lot of the associations were very different. For example, you have the difference between Athena and Athena's Roman counterparts. And in one of them, you have a lot of associations with just like wisdom and almost this concept of peace, whereas the other is very much the strategist of war. If Ares has dominion over the spirit of war, then she has dominion over battle strategy.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say I couldn't remember which one it was, but I remember one of them, Athena, was very warlike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's when a character in a story across two stories is so different, even if they have a similar inspiration or one is based off another, I don't think you can really say it was taken from it from an inside examination, though I do understand where the impression comes up from the outside.
Okay. Well, we do have a question here from Ed again. Are there any types of meditation or mantras and pagan beliefs that you practice?
That depends how loosely you want to define meditation. Like, I will sit and have quiet and introspect just after a ritual. But I think calling that meditation would be a very loose way of putting it.
Well, in Buddhism,
if you include that, yes.
Yeah, in Buddhism, that's actually called sitting meditation. Because in Buddhism, like I didn't know this till I started doing my own research. You have walking meditation, you have sitting meditation, you have laying down meditation. There's even a sleeping meditation.
You can probably argue I do walking meditation to some extent, but I tend to have music on while I do that, and I tend to be trying to focus on a specific train of thought. So again, it depends how you mean meditation.
Yeah, see, I do a lot of when now that the weather's getting warmer, I'm gonna go back to start doing my walks again. I do a lot of walking meditation, but I will put in like a podcast or something. But I'm listening to the podcast, but I'm not paying attention, and I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing. I'm just kind of zoned. I'm just focused on the walk. It's more there to help drown out the cars going back and forth.
Oh yeah, when I want that sort of thing, I have a specific musician who I go and listen to some of their stuff called Ian Grimm, EAN Grimm with 2 M's. They do like a lot of fantasy style music that it's very easy to just kind of put it on, have the surrounding noise cut out, and just kind of focus on what you're doing. In fact, when I'm streaming, I usually have it very quietly in the background. So at the moment, I'm listening to some like Celtic forest style music.
I want to make sure that I do get this out at some point. If you're new to the channel and you like what you're seeing, Hereticals is taking on a big difference change starting this week. We're doing a lot more stuff. Please like the video you're watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Chris and we're Hereticals right now is sitting at 898. Love to hit that 1,000 before next month. That would be awesome. That way we can bring more stuff to the community and whatnot. But I had to throw that out there. If I didn't, somebody would choke me. So we do have I see a couple more questions popped up here real quick. Microraptor again says, maybe this is a question for an astronomer, but is it a coincidence that the biggest planet in the solar system was named after Jupiter? Biggest obviously doesn't mean it has to be the biggest in the sky. That would probably be more for...
Yeah, had I read more Aristotle, I might be able to answer that for you.
Yeah, I've got nothing there, so...
No, the closest I could get is a semi-educated guess that it happens to have lined up, but it being a gas giant, which therefore makes it bigger, makes its perception different in the sky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be a question, Microraptor, to go on a stump Jen.
It certainly would.
Yeah.
Oh, where are some Jen?
I can actually answer that. It's because it's the biggest one. It was named after Jupiter. So that's the exact reason, because of the size of it. Anyway, I'm going to leave you two alone.
Another question for you, Sam. Ed again wants to know, when using runes, are there any certain prayers or anything that should be said?
Not the way I do it. I know some people, if they're doing it in a religious context, will have written out a small ritual that they will recite before pulling a rune stone or before shaking out a bag if they're going to have them spread out, depending how they do it.
Like now, no, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
I personally don't, but I do have like there's almost like a prayer, like if you want to use Christian language, because it's not really like prayer in a pagan sense. Like moment of thinking and concentrating and contemplating before pulling a runestone.
Yeah. So what I was gonna say is, for me, like, when I light incense, I face north, south, east, and west. And when I first light the incense, I hold it up, and I say, Om Mani Padme Hum. It is literally translates to, I can look this up. I actually have this bookmarked on my phone. Because I always forget it. It's literal translation is praise to the jewel of the lotus. The Dalai Lama says that the meaning is so great and vast, it wraps up all of Buddha's teaching in one phrase. So I will say those to the four different directions, and then there's and I lost that one. A little prayer that I say. I don't have that one with me at the moment, but it's like I take refuge in the Buddha, and then there's a couple more lines, and then I take refuge in the Dharma, and there's a couple more lines to go with that, and then I take refuge in the Sangha. So each one of those. So when you take refuge, that means you're giving yourself, over your whatnot. Yeah. So the Buddha, now the Dharma, for those that don't know, the Dharma is basically the scriptures, the teaching of the Buddha, and the Sangha is the Buddha, the community that you're in with the Buddhists, which I right now consider all Buddhists in one community for myself, because I don't have a community, so I just incorporate all of them. Like I don't have a temple I can go to, I don't have a monk I can go talk to face to face, so I just kind of grab them all. Yeah.
I've got a short story that I think you might find entertaining. Is that my granddad was a notorious bullshitter where we live, and one of the cafes he used to frequent, one of the people who he used to go with is an ex-Buddhist monk.
Yeah, there are some out there. You don't find them very often, but yeah.
Oh yeah, they're not common, but this was Daz, and he would let my granddad get away with some really stupid shit. So once it was raining, and the lady who was waiting didn't clear up the chairs outside, didn't think to. And when the manager went to have a go at her, my granddad stopped the manager and said, "Hey, don't have a go at her. She's a Buddhist. She's not allowed to pick up chairs." And Daz went along with this. And they went for like a solid half an hour explaining to this lady how being a Buddhist means that you're not allowed to pick up chairs because it would symbolize separating yourself from the earth. Or some shit like this. And it was the fact that we're able to have a sense of humor about it, I think, is fun.
Yeah. And see, that's another thing. There's one of the reasons I like Zen Buddhism. And Buddhism in itself, because you see too many people see a lot of Buddhists. They're very stern. They're very stone-faced. Yeah. And that's not true. Even Buddha himself says you need to have a sense of humor. And if you can't have a sense, if you can't laugh at yourself, you're doing something wrong. You know, you got to be able to take in that inner humor.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of things around having a sense of humor that's just good for you, I guess.
Mm.
Like, not in any sort of spiritual sense, just that if you're constantly stressed out, that's physically bad for you.
Yeah.
And that is a thing I think is potentially worth noting as well, is that I acknowledge, because a lot of these answers are religion related, some of it might seem like I'm almost encouraging woo. No, don't do that. Pseudoscience is pseudoscience, and it's separate from religious stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like the people who do like pseudoscience and say it's because of their paganism really frustrate me. We sometimes refer to them as fluffy bunnies, but that's a very nice name for them. Something. These crystals will heal your cancer.
Yeah, no, don't. Yeah, the woo is crystals and which
like I have crystals right here next to my desk, but because they're pretty.
Yeah, I don't do. I don't do a lot of the like essential oils and jelly juice. You know, that kind of. Yeah. So, Chris, you got a question? What is your reactions in the pagan community like?
So my interactions in the pagan community are generally. So there's two, I guess, main groups of pagan communities, because pagans are as kind of separate, I guess, as some like atheist communities can be, or even like individual churches and shit. And like my interactions have either been they are racist or they're fairly accepting. And the racist ones, I'm like, nope, you're not with me. And the accepting ones I've kind of hung out in, and that's where I've made a load of my friends. That's where I met both my partners. And there's how do words this afternoon just apparently no.
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
So yeah, there's a lot of kind of friendly interactions. I've made a bunch of friends there. Typically, they're fairly accepting of different ideas. I've noticed a significant number of people in pagan communities I hang around with are atheists who have just gone, now the pagans are more chill, fuck you guys.
Yeah.
And my kind of general experiences of feeling welcomed and being able to get on, though there are some groups of pagans where they take one look at me and go, nope.
So before we get on to this question here, I have noticed that, especially when I interact with atheists and pagans and Christians, the like you said before, the pagans seem to be more chill than everybody else. They really don't care what it is you believe. As long as you're not trying to force that belief upon them, they really don't care. And there are some atheists that are like that too, But there are some that are like, oh, you got a religion, you bad person, you know, or you don't believe in God, you bad person, you know, and it's just, yeah. So Chris does have while we're still on this, Chris does have the question. When you say racist pagans, can you elaborate on who they are and what they believe? Are they like Aryan Norse? Now, I'm not guessing. I'm guessing he doesn't want you to specifically point out somebody. But
so the answer there would be yes. A lot of them I see referring frequently to the 14 words, and I will call out a specific group, the AFA, the Asatru Folk Assembly, specifically have in their their mission statements as a charity that they want to promote the well-being of the white people. So when I say racist, I mean like racist like Nazis. Now some of them are more gentle with it. Some of them it's kind of like, oh well, we are superior to you because we're white and only white people can interact with the gods. Which is like there's ideas of that and similar to that get referred to as folkism. And the general sentiment is fuck folkists, though some folkists do end up being like that just because the first other pagans they come across are folkists. So some of them you can talk to, but a lot of them, if I say I have a friend who's half black who practices Hellenism, they will go, oh, well, her experiences with the gods aren't real then.
Well, you can't really count out somebody's experience with the gods, and that's one of the things that when talking to about Christians and Christianity, one of the biggest things that I used to, but I don't so much anymore, is people's when they say, "Well, I have had this personal experience." Well, it's their personal experience. It's the way they've interpreted. You really can't discount it. Now, if they come down and said, well, God stood there in the kitchen talking to me for an hour, well, that maybe you need to see a doctor because I think you're hallucinating.
Yeah. So
but if you get a feeling that something was there with you, that's a different.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of factors that go into a lot of this stuff that, like, someone could be high out of their mind. Someone could be stressed and exhausted. Someone could have some sort of mental health issue. And all of these are perfectly fair, but they also are things that, if they're occurring at the time, you should maybe think about that when you have a strong spiritual experience.
We'll do this question, then I've got a question for you here. Ed, again, does Sam agree that the racist pagans are twisting those teachings to fit their narrative?
So I wouldn't say it's twisting any teachings. I would say it's twisting historical representations. So a lot of them will use the justification that the Norse were effectively a warrior race who went out and conquered other lands because they were better than the others, which is A, not how that works, and B, if a Norse family adopted a black child, the black child was considered Norse. That was it. And so the racism that they say is there just historically wasn't. And so I wouldn't necessarily say they're twisting teachings. I'd say they're twisting things we know about history. And so I do think they're absolutely wrong in that the cultures that we're trying to reconstruct from wouldn't have done that. But I don't think it's explicitly like there's any religious teaching because it was so separate and there were so many different groups that there's not really one teaching, so to speak.
Now, speaking of twisting things, it actually comes back to both of us, is the symbolism. I know as of lately, the Norse, the white racists and whatnot have been stealing a lot of Norse symbols and claiming them as their own. Buddhism is one. It's got a symbol that is probably considered the worst hatred, and that's the swastika, which is so bad because the swastika is one of the oldest symbols known to man, and it means so many different things.
See, when inverted, the swastika also is I think, Chinese symbol of luck. So in different cultures, we've had there's only so many different ways to draw a symbol.
Yeah.
And human brains are wired a certain way. We like certain symbols. So things like the swastika or the black sun, while the black sun was actually created by the Nazis, but it was based on something that wasn't, and that was Norse symbolism. And so there is a lot of stuff that is like that. That was just okay. So these guys are just stealing our shit and pretending it's theirs now.
Yeah. Just a shameless plug, though. If you want to learn more about the swastika, I actually have a video on my channel explaining the history and what it means for different cultures, including the Nazis. But that's a shameless plug, but whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, some good questions going on. I think we're gonna wrap it up. We're getting about the hour mark. I figure we'll only do about an hour. This was a good chat. Next time I think we should get together. I think we should pull Chris in for the full
absolutely.
Get Chris's and maybe, you know, see if we can't pull someone from another religion, get a four-way going in some conversations here. But so before we take off, why don't you let everybody know who you are, what you do, where they can find you, stuff like that. I know this has been a great talk. I've talked with you briefly here and there. I really would have loved to have been on that panel you were on. When you guys had on Jen's channel, they had, I think Chris was there and Jen and Steve.
Oh yeah, that was fun.
I couldn't make that one because I had to work. I was so upset. I'm like, I really wanted to be there.
That was a controversial stream because we just had all the people there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I am Sam Chaos on YouTube and Twitter. In theory, Instagram, but we'll see. And I on Twitter I just kind of scream into the void, and then occasionally it screams back. And then on YouTube I occasionally release pre-recorded content, but I primarily have a podcast that we premiere new episodes of at 5 p.m. Central Time every Wednesday. And it's Pub Religion, which is where, so the premise is like a pun. A pagan, a Christian, and an atheist walk into a bar. And so I have an atheist co-host, Will, from over at Godless Sewing, and a Christian co-host, Maddie, from over at Science Side Up. And they're both great. And so we're on episode 7 this week. Tomorrow's episode is going to be the difference between religion and a cult, using like cult in the modern sense of the word.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's about it.
Cool. Well, everybody knows me, so I'm not going to tell you who I am, but I want to let you know what's coming up here on Hereticals. Tomorrow, I'll be flying solo, unless Chris decides he's able to pop in. We'll be talking about, I actually pulled up an article. It's the 8 I'm trying to remember the 8 conspiracies about COVID that will not go away. It's from the Scientific Journal. It's a rundown of what the conspiracy is, what's behind it, and why it's not true. We're going to be going over that. So that's every Wednesday. So every Wednesday on conspiracies, we'll be talking different conspiracies, whether we believe them or we don't believe them or whatnot. On Friday, we were actually going to be covering. Chris found a weird article from Answers in Genesis, so we'll be covering that on Six Pack. And then on Mondays, we're doing Today in History. So this week, so we just did the first one, really fun. We're going to do some little tweaking to it. Of course, you always do it on after the first one. But this week on Monday, we'll be talking about Queen Victoria and Copernicus, plus birthdays, deaths, pop culture type things. So thank you guys for coming. This was fun. We hope to have more of these type of discussions. If anybody just wants to come on and talk to me and ask me a bunch of questions, feel free to get a hold of Chris. And he can set that up. We'll do those on either Tuesdays or Thursdays. If you want to come in and you want to talk to Chris about something, get a hold of Chris, or both of us, or if you want to see about pulling one of the other people from Six Pack, or you just want to debate somebody, you got somebody you're back and forth about, you want a place to go to debate, bring him to us. We'll throw you on a Tuesday or a Thursday. We'll throw you in there. we'll get you some time so you guys can debate back and forth. I think we seen in the chat that we finally hit 900. And we are at 900 here on Hereticals. We're hoping to shoot that 1,000 mark by next month. That way we can give Chris a good birthday present, and we can get some more stuff out to everybody. Get some new things going. Lots of stuff from the chat saying thank you. It was a good stream.
Yeah, it was very fun. So thank you for having me on, and thank you to Chris for letting us come on and have the chat.
Yeah, we should bring Chris in here for the end and see if he's got anything he wants to add.
I reckon I could have sat there and listened to this conversation for hours. That was a cool conversation. I wasn't, and no slight on anyone. I sort of thought, okay, it could be interesting to see how it goes on a channel with a primarily atheist audience. What an informative conversation. I think it would be remiss of us not to try and get a part 2 at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, it was funny.
I'd be down for part 2.
Me and Sam were actually talking about that before we first started. It'd be interesting to see was it 2 theists on an atheist channel.
Yeah.
So, anything you want to add before we sign off, Chris?
No, cool chat. I mean, this is this week Jay chats too. So I mean, I'm just the guy in the background, sort of pressing the buttons and poking fun at Ed in the chat. So I've got a pretty easy one.
Speaking of Ed, make sure you guys go in 15 minutes. Grumpy's going to be having one of his grumpy rants. So head on over to the Grumpy Old Dude.
And if you haven't seen a grumpy rants are the best rants. he fight just the look on his face. It's always a brilliant thing. I guess I just want to say thank you to everyone in the chat. Thanks to everyone who's coming across and supporting us. I guess we do this for fun. We do this for conversations. But the conversations, I guess they're really enriched by what's happening in the chat, the people who are here, the people who are engaging, the people who are asking questions, and the people who support us. So thank you to everyone. And hey, 900's cool. I've got a big birthday coming up middle of next month. I'd love to hit that 1,000 just because it's a nice number. And it's
Grumpy did just put in the chat the link to the Grumpy rant. So make sure you head on over there.
Everyone head over and watch it. I'm
not sure what this week's about. He's been kind of hush about what's going on.
Grumpy ranting is certainly always interesting.
Yeah,
I've got a pretty good idea. I'm looking forward to this one. This one's right up my alley. So if it's the one I'm thinking of, it could be something completely different. It's I could have egg on my face after this, but yeah, you're right. I am a sexy fucker. That's right, Ed. Don't you forget it. Don't you forget it. Oh, well, thanks everyone for coming along. Thanks to both of you for the conversation. I mean, hey, Jay, this thing's your baby. Like I said, I'm just the background guy.
Yeah. So, like I said, anybody in the chat, there are some names I recognize. Couple one like I've Normalizing Atheism, Dragons and Genesis podcast.
Oh, he's Pastor Mike in the chat.
Pastor Mike showed up. Where's Spotty? He's Pastor Mike.
Huh. He's my second favorite pasta, right after fettuccine.
Oh, the Normalizing.
Fettuccine's just too good.
Normalizing Atheism. I was looking for Pasta Mike. I'm like, I don't see him.
It's Pasta Mike,
yeah, and then I was like, duh.
Yeah.
So like I said, if anybody wants to talk to anybody, you got a debate or you want to chat, you need some place to go, let us know. You want to talk to a Buddhist, let us know. You want to talk to an atheist, let us know. We'll set that up for you Tuesdays and Thursdays. So
if you want to talk to yourself.
Yeah, you want to sit and if you don't have a channel and you want a place you want to go rant, talk to Ed.
Yeah. He's the master of that.
He's the master Ed. So thank you guys for coming. Like I said, this was an enjoyable chat, Sam. Love to have you back on because there was so much. I mean, I didn't even get into half of the Greek stuff I wanted to talk about.
There's a bunch of ground to cover on both of our ends, isn't there?
Yeah. There's like I said, there's so much of the stuff I wanted to talk about with the Greek, but just not enough time. So,
yeah.
But thank you so much, Sam, for coming on. Thank you, Chris, for giving us this. head on over to Edge channel and listen to that grumpy rat. And till next time, be water, my friends.